Holding in the Gemara towards the bottom of Memvav Amud Beis, where it says Amar Rav Yehuda, 4 lines from the bottom. We're discussing here the halachas of Shmini Atzeres. Before the Gemara spoke about lulav, if you're chayiv in the mitzvah of lulav and Shmini Atzeres or not. So no one holds that you are. But the question was, beneged to the lulav and esrog, whether it's iskatzoi, whether it's designated only for Shana Rabbah, or it'd be usher to have a na from on Shmini Atzeres as well. That was the discussion till there. Now the Gemara is going to discuss the mitzvah of Sukkah. Amar Rav Yehuda bereid Rav Shmuel bar Shilat mishmei de Rav. So he said in the name of Rav, Shmini suffix shvi. On Shmini Atzeres, which is a suffix, that it could be the 7th day of Sukkah. If you don't know when the Chodesh was, so it's a suffix. Shvi l'Sukkah, we consider the day to be like the 7th day of Sukkot regarding the mitzvah of Sukkah. Shmini l'bracha. But on the other hand, it's considered to be Shmini Atzeres regarding the bracha, which means in the davening. The nusach that you say is Shmini Atzeres hachag hazeh, in davening and in benching and so on. Rabbi Yochanan says Shmini lezeh lezeh. It's considered to be Shmini Atzeres, the 8th day, both regarding the mitzvah of Sukkah and regarding the nusach that you say in davening and in the benching. So the Gemara explains the machlokes. Meisev, regarding actually sitting in the sukkah, kula amale pligadi yesevina. Nobody argues that you must sit in the sukkah because it's a suffix. It might be the 7th day. So even Rabbi Yochanan agrees that you have to sit in the sukkah. Ki pligi, regarding what is the argument? Levruchi, whether to make the bracha of leishav basukkah. Laman da mashvi l'sukkah. The opinion that says that it's the 7th day regarding sukkah, which was Rav. Bruchi nami mevarchina. You even make a bracha of leishav basukkah. Since there's a suffix, it's a suffix shvi, so therefore, just like every yom tov sheni, it's like the yom tov rishon, and you make a bracha, and so on, so too over here. Shmini atzeres, you have to make a bracha. Lamanda ma shmini lezeh lezeh. The opinion of Yochanan that says that it's shmini for both. What he's saying is bruchi loy mevarchina. You don't make a bracha either. As Rashi says, it's Shmini Atzeres already. It has the name Shmini. Doesn't have the name of Sukkot on it. So therefore, you don't make a bracha, not leishav basukkah, and the nusach is Shmini Atzeres hachag hazeh. That's our nusach. Rashi brings a little bit of a different nusach. Shmini chag Atzeres hazeh. Amar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef said regarding this argument, Nekait de Rav Yochanan biyadcha. You should take the opinion of Rav Yochanan in your hands. That's how you should do. The Rav Huna bar Bizna, because Rav Huna bar Bizna v'chol gedolei adayr, and all the great people of that generation, iklu b'sukkah, so they came into a sukkah b'shmini suffix shvi, on the Shmini Atzeres, which is a suffix to be the 7th day of Sukkot. And what do? Meisav avayasvi, they sat in the sukkah, but bruchi loy brichi, but a bracha of leishav basukkah they didn't make. So we see that that's what everybody did. So that's the halacha. So the Gemara asks us this: how do you know? But v'dilme, maybe the reason they didn't make a bracha was for another reason. Svira luhu kamanda amar. Maybe they hold like that opinion that we had before in the Gemara, that kivish shebirich yantiv rishain. You make the bracha the first day of yantiv, and shuv enim mevarach, and then you don't make a bracha again. Maybe that's the reason they didn't make a bracha. So the Gemara answers, no, Gemiri, we know that he says, that Rashi says, we have a tradition, I heard from my Rebbes regarding this incident, the me'afar also, they came out from a place with the animals that they were pasturing out in the field, and therefore they did not fulfill the mitzvah of Sukkah until this day, until Shmini Atzeres. That's the simple pshat of the Gemara. They were there outside in a place where they're not obligated in the sukkah. We had before in the Gemara, a shepherd with his behemoths is not a mechuyev in sukkah, because if he's going to sit in the sukkah, then ganovim will come. So he's there. It's a place where he's not obligated to be in the sukkah b'chlal. So they were not in the sukkah until today, and nevertheless they didn't make a bracha on Shmini Atzeres. This Fasema says a little bit of a different shot in the Gemara, because he says it's a pella to say that Rabbi Huna bar Bizna and all the gedolei adayr stayed outside and did not do the mitzvah of Sukkah even the first night of Sukkot. How could this be? So he says, the pshat in the mandama that says that you don't make a new bracha of leishav basukkah the entire Sukkot is because he holds it's all one hemshech of a mitzvah, right? Because you chayiv in the mitzvah of Sukkah by day, by night, so it's one long mitzvah. So he says over here what happened was they were in the Sukkah the first day of Sukkot and they ate in the Sukkah, they made a bracha. But then they left and they went out into the afar in a place where you potter from Sukkah. So the moment you go to a place that you potter from Sukkah, so it's not anymore one long hemshech. So now they came back, Shmini Atzeres, they would have to make a bracha. And nevertheless, they didn't make a bracha. So that proves, like the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, that you don't make a bracha on Shmini Atzeres. Ikkedamri, there are others that say another pshat in this machlokes of Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. Beruchi, regarding the bracha of Leisha Basukkah, Kul Alma Lepliga Deloy Mevarchina. Nobody argues that you don't make the bracha of Leisha Basukkah. Ki pligi, the machlokes of Rav and Rabbi Yochanan was what? Lemeisa, regarding actually whether you even have to b'chlal sit in the sukkah or not. So the man, the Omar, Shiva, the opinion which is Rav that says, or the Bach says, Shvi lesukkah, that is considered to be the seventh day regarding sukkah, Meisav Yesvinan. He's saying that you have to sit in the sukkah without a bracha. And the opinion which is Rabbi Yochanan that says that it's considered to be the eighth day, lezeh ulezeh, for the bracha. And for sukkah, Meisav Nami lo Yesvinan. What Rabbi Yochanan was saying was that you don't have to sit in the sukkah b'chlal. It's already Shmini Atzeres, there's no sukkah b'chlal. Amar Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef said, Nekoit de Rav Yochanan b'yotcha. According to this version, you should also paskin like Rav Yochanan. Why? The Mara, the Shmaite, Mani, the one who is the master of this Shmua, of this that you said before in the name of Rav, that you do sit in the sukkah. Rav Yehuda, Bereda Shmo Bashilat. He was the one that said it in the name of Rav, that you do have to sit in the sukkah. Ubishmini, Safik Shvi, Lebam Sukkah Yosef. And he himself, when it came Shmini Atzeres, he sat outside the sukkah. So he himself repeated this in the name of Rav, with B'payil, he did like Rabbi Yochanan. So therefore, in this version, you should go according to Rabbi Yochanan, and you don't have to sit in the sukkah. The Hilchas, the halacha is, Meisav Yesvinon, Beruchi Loy Mevachinon. That you do sit in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, but you don't make the bracha of Leisha Basukkah. That's the halacha that it says here in the Gemara. This is the way it's brought in Shulchan Aruch as well. But the Magen Avraham, Shulchan Aruch, I think it's in Siman Tov Reish Nun Vav, maybe later in Siman Tov Reish Samach Ches. So he brings over there, Kama v'Kama Menhagim. There are those that actually don't sit in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, those that only make Kiddush in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres. But Minik Chabad is to sit in the sukkah. Not only that, the hiddur of not drinking or anything outside the sukkah all 7 days is also on Shmini Atzeres, that everything is in the sukkah. Now the Gemara discusses another halacha regarding Shmini Atzeres, the halacha of making a shechayanu. Amar Rav Yochanan, Oimrim Zman b'Shmini Shel Chag. You make a bracha of shechayanu on Shmini Atzeres. Ve'ein Oimrim Zman b'Shvi Shel Pesach. But on Shvi Shel Pesach, you do not say a bracha of shechayanu. V'amar Rab Levi bar Chama, v'yiteimer Rav Chama bar Chanina. What's the reason why by Shmini Atzeres you make a shechayanu? Teida, I'll prove this to you, that it's a separate yontif. You have to make a new shechayanu. Shahare Chaluk begimel dvarim. It's different than the rest of Sukkahs in 3 aspects. The Sukkah, regarding Sukkah, that you don't sit in the Sukkah. The Lulav, the mitzvah of Lulav that is not on Shmini Atzeres. And the Nisach HaMayim. The Nisach HaMayim in the Beis HaMikdash was only 7 days and not in Shmini Atzeres. Ula Rabbi Yehuda, the Omar, now according to Rabbi Yehuda that says, we'll learn it soon in the Gemara, the next blot, Belugay Menasach Kol Shmoina. He says actually that the Nisach HaMayim is all 8 days, even Shmini Atzeres. Harechalak bebeis dvarim. So it's different from the rest of Sukkot in 2 things regarding Sukkah and Lulav. So therefore it's a yontif for itself. Frag the Gemara, if this is the pointer, that because it's different in these 2 aspects, that's enough of a reason to say that it's a separate yontif and to make a shechayanu. If so, Shvi Shel Pesach nami harechalak ba'achilas matzah. Shvi Shel Pesach, there's also a difference regarding the mitzvah of eating matzah. Because the master said, and we had this before in the Gemara as well, Laila Rishayna Chayva. First night of Pesach, it's an obligation to eat matzah. Mikan ve'elech, from there forward, Rishos, it's only a Rishos, it's you're allowed to eat, you're allowed to eat. If you're eating, you have to eat matzah, but it's not a chiyav to eat matzah. So there's a difference. On the first night, it's a mitzvah. The rest of the days, it's not a mitzvah. So the Gemara is not asking regarding Chol HaMoed, but regarding Shvi Shel Pesach, which is a yontif, and here's a yontif where the eating of the matzah is different than the first yontif, where it's an obligation, so there's a difference here. Maybe that should be enough that you make a shechayanu. So the Gemara says, no, there's a few differences. Hachi hashta, how could you compare this to Shmini Atzeres? Hasam milayla chaluk, miyayim ein chaluk. When it comes to Shvi Shel Pesach, so there's a difference in Shvi Shel Pesach from the first night of Pesach. But it's not different than the first day of Pesach. The first day of Pesach, there's also no chiyuv to eat matzah. So it's not new in that sense. You don't make a bracha of shechayanu. Over here, regarding Shmini Atzeres, Shmini Atzeres is different even from the first day of Sukkot, where you sit in the Sukkah and there's the mitzvah of lulav, and here there isn't. Ravina answers, Zeh cholok mishalafonov. Shmini Atzeres is different from the day right before, from all the entire Sukkot, including Hoshana Rabbah, the day right before. This is only different from what's in the beginning of Yontif, the first day of Yontif, where it's an obligation to eat matzah, and today it isn't. But the rest of of Pesach, that is, where there's no chiyuv to eat matzah, that it's the same. So therefore it's not different. It's considered to be a chelik of the Yontif of Pesach. Amar Rav Papa, there's another girsa on the side here, Rav Papa Amar, and the difference in these two girsais is Rav Papa coming also to address the difference between Shiur Shel Pesach and Shmini Atzeres, and he's giving another pshat, or is Rav Papa just coming to explain why Shmini Atzeres is a yontif for itself and it's not a part of Sukkot, but he's not coming to explain the difference from Pesach. In the Lashon of Rashi, it's mashma that he's not coming to explain the difference of Shiur Shel Pesach. So Rav Papa explains, here is why Shmini Atzeres is different than the rest of Sukkot. Halcha ksiv, regarding Shmini Atzeres, the Torah says par. There's one par that's brought as a carbon. Hasam ksiv, regarding the rest of Sukkot, parim. There's various different numbers of parim that are brought every day, so you see that the carbon is different. Rav Nachman by Yitzchak Amar, Rav Nachman Yitzchak says another distinction. Hacha ksiv bayayim. Over here, by the carbon of Shmini Atzeres, the Torah starts with bayayim Shmini Atzeres. Hasam ksiv ubayayim. Regarding the other days of Sukkot, the Torah writes always ubayayim with a vav, so it's a continuation. It's one yontif. Bayayim without a vav is a separate yontif. Rav Ashi Amar, Rav Ashi says another difference is hacha ksiv kamishpat. By Shmini Atzeres it says kamishpat. Hasam ksiv kamishpat tam. Regarding the last day of Sukkot, on Hoshana Rabbah, the Torah writes the lashon kamishpat tam. So therefore, the change of the lashon is for this reason, to tell you that it's a separate yontif for itself. So this is all to come and explain what Rabbi Yochanan said, that on Shmini Atzeres you make a bracha of Shechiyanu. Shall we say we have a raya to what Rabbi Yochanan said? Because it says, Nabraise, Haporim, Ho'elim, Va'akvasim. These are the three kinds of karbanis that are brought during Sukkot, Ma'akvin Zeh Ezeh. They are ma'akev, they hold up one another, which means if you're missing from one of them, so then you can't bring the karbanis. You have to have all of them and the right number in order to be able to bring them as the karbanis for the day. Rabbi Yehuda says, Parim e'ma'akvin zeh. When it comes to the parim, that's not going to be ma'akev the other karbanis, even if you don't have the exact number of parim that you need. Sharei mismat and v'hoilchin. Since you see regarding the parim, every day there was a different number of parim, so therefore you see that the Torah is not makpid that it should be the exact number, even if in this day it's supposed to be this number. But because in Sukkot B'chlal, the parim, the number changes, so therefore they're not makpiv one another with the number. Amrullah, so the Chachamim said to Rabbi Yehuda, if that's your svara, say the same thing regarding the Elim and the Kvasim. When it comes to Shmini Atzeres, so the Elim and the Kvasim change in number as well. As Rashi here brings, the Kvasim on Sukkot, it was 14. On Shmini Atzeres, so there was only 7 Kvasim. And when it comes to the Ayel, so all Sukkot, it was 2 Elim, and on Shmini Atzeres, it's 1 Ayel. So the number of the Kvasim and the Elim also changes. Amalehen, so Rabbi Yehuda answered, you're bringing me a raya from Shmini Atzeres, that the number changes. Shmini regel b'fnei atzmayu. Shmini Atzeres is a yontif for itself. And he explains in what sense it's a yontif for itself. Shekishem, sheshivis yimei achag. Tu'unin, carbon, all 7 days of yontif. So that has the number of karbanas that you bring, v'shir, and then there's the shir that the Leviim would sing on these karbanas during the yontif. So Rashi here brings the shiur, which we're going to learn later, also the Gemara here in this Masechta, Hovul Hashem. So there's a certain theme of what the shiur was about. Rashi here brings the theme of the shiur during Sukkot was regarding Matnas Aniyim, because it's the Chag HaOsef, it's the time when you bring in all the tvua from the field, so therefore you sing a shiur to remind Yidden to do the mitzvah of Leket, Shikha, and Peya, and the Maisris, and so on, and they should give Ba'ayin Yofa. And then Bracha. He says that it's also, there's a certain Bracha that you say during the Yontiv of Sukkot, which the Gemara is going to explain in a second. And Velina. Then there's a halacha of Lina, which is, the Gemara is also going to bring soon the pasuk when you come for the first day of Yontiv. So only in the next morning, Ufanisa ba'boiker v'alachta lo'alecha, you only leave the place in Yerushalayim the next morning, not that day. So that's b'negeya to the 7 days of Sukkot. So it has these halachas that apply for it. Av Shmini, when it comes to Shmini Atzeres, it's a yontif for itself, ton, carbon. It has a separate carbon for itself, shiur, and it has a separate shiur for itself. It's interesting, Rashi actually says that he doesn't know what the shiur of Shmini Atzeres is. It's not explained ever in the Gemara. Taisus over here says, he brings from Masechta Seifrim that what the shiur was, Lam Natseach ala Shminis. That was the shiur that the Levium sang. And bracha, Shmini Atzeres has a bracha for itself. And lina, this halacha of sleeping over the night till the next morning also separately applies to Shmini Atzeres. So therefore it's a yontif for itself, so you can't bring me any raya from the change of the number of karbanos in Shmini Atzeres regarding Sukkahs. So now the Gemara focuses on the lashon of bracha that it's said here. So my love, don't you think, what does that term bracha mean? That Shmini Atzeres is a bracha for itself? Zman, don't you think that refers to Shechayanu? That Shmini Atzeres has a bracha for itself, Shechayanu. So this is a raya to what Rav Yechanan said, that you make a Shechayanu on Shmini Atzeres. So the Gemara answers, Loi, that's not what the bracha is talking about. Birchas Hamazon and Tefillah, it's talking about the nusach that you say in Birchas Hamazon and Tefillah, that on Sukkot you say Chag HaSukkos Hazeh, and on Shmini Atzeres you say Shmini Atzeres HaChag Hazeh. That's what it's referring to. And the Gemara proves it. Hachanami mistavre. I'll bring you a raya to this. Zman. If you would say it's referring to Shechayanu, Zman kol shiva miyike. Do you have the bracha of Shechayanu in all 7 days of Sukkot? The Braisa was making a difference between the 7 days of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres regarding bracha. But there is no bracha all seven. The bracha of Shechayanu all 7 days of Sukkot. But that the Gemara says, no, that's not a raya. Ha loy kashya. That's not a question. The loy baracha idne. Because Shechayanu, if you don't make the bracha the first day of Sukkot, mevarach lemachar, you can make the next day, or any of the other 7 days of Sukkot. So you do have the bracha of Shechayanu possible each one of the 7 days if you forgot to make it before. But the Gemara asks, how could that be? You have to have a kais of wine to be able to make the bracha of Shechayanu. So how could you have Shechayanu during Chol HaMoed? So Rashi says, Ein yayin motzei l'choladam b'chodesh Shabbat. That to have wine every day Chol HaMoed, it's not always found for a person to have. So therefore, we don't consider the bracha Shechayanu to be a bracha that's possible all days of Chol HaMoed. So therefore, we go back to what we said, that the lashon of bracha in the Braisa refers to Birchas Hamazon and Tefillah. Now the Gemara says, based on this, this that we wanted to say in the beginning, that it refers to the bracha of Shechayanu, and the bracha of Shechayanu is possible each one of the days of Chol HaMoed. If that would be the pshat, then this is a raya to what Rav Nachman said. The Amar Rav Nachman said, Zman, the bracha of Shechayanu, oimroi afilu b'shuk, you could say it even in the marketplace. Which means that you could say it any time without a kais. The amrit being in kais. If you're going to say that the pshat here is that you have to have a kais kol yomim miyike, could you have a kais for the bracha of Shechayanu each one of the days of Chol HaMoed? Like Rashi said before, it's not matzah to have a kais. So if you're going to say that the pshat in the Braisa is that it refers to the bracha of Shechayanu, so then this is a raya to what Rav Nachman said, that you can make the bracha even standing in the marketplace and you don't need a kais. So the Gemara says, no, from this Braisa you don't have a raya to what Rav Nachman said. We pass like Rav Nachman, but from here there's no raya. Why? Because Dilma, the ikla kais. Possibly a person will have a kais. True, it's not matzui, but maybe he will have a kais. So even if the pshat in the Braisa is that it's talking about Shechayanu, but it could be that there is a kais. So according to this maskana the Gemara here, when the Braisa says bracha, you could have either pshat works, either it refers to the nusach bracha of Chag HaSukkos Shmini Atzeres HaChag Hazeh, or it refers to Shechayanu. And Shechayanu is relevant each one of the days of Sukkot, even in Chol HaMoed, because even during Chol HaMoed, it's possible that it'll have a kais to make the bracha for Shechayanu, or maybe according to Rav Nachman, you don't need a kais b'chlal. Okay. Now the Gemara goes back to what it said before in the Braisa. One of the things that was mentioned before was that Shmini Atzeres is a regel b'fnei atzmo. In what sense? That this halacha of lina, of sleeping over, applies separately for Shmini Atzeres. Fragt the Gemara, v'sav Rabbi Yehuda, Shmini ton lina? Does Rabbi Yehuda hold that Shmini Atzeres, you have to sleep over in Yerushalayim till the next morning? Tanya, but we learned in the Braisa, Rabbi Yehuda said, Minayin lePesach Sheni, she'eina ton lina. When you bring the Pesach Sheni, you do not have to stay until the next morning. Shenemar, because the pasuk by the Pesach Rishon says, Ufanisa ba'boker, and you go in the morning, Valachtu lo'alecha, you go back to your tent, you can go back home. Uksiv, right afterwards in the pasuk there it says, Sheishis Yomim Teichel Matzos. That's 6 days of the Pesach eat matzahs. So what we learn out is, Es Shaton Shisha, Ton Lina. If it's a yantif where there's the mitzvah to eat, or there's the inyan of matzah that applies all 6 days, then Ton Lina. Then you have to stay over until the next morning. Es she'ein ton shisha, but if it's like Pesach Sheni, that it's only that, the carbon Pesach that you bring that day, but there's no inyan of matzah the rest of the 6 days, ein ton lina. So then this mitzvah of lina, of sleeping over to the next morning, doesn't apply. So the Gemara now says, L'mu'utemai. So what does this come to exclude? Lav l'mu'utein nami shmini shochag. Don't you think, just like he's saying clearly in the Brisa that it comes to exclude Pesach Sheni, because there's no shisha of matzah, so it also comes to exclude Shmini Atzeres, because Shmini Atzeres also doesn't have any additional days that follow afterwards. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, there is no lina by Shmini Atzeres. So how does he say before in the Brisa that there is? So the Gemara says, no, it's not a question. Loi, l'mu'ute Pesach Sheni, d'chvasei. It only comes to exclude Pesach Sheni, which is similar to Pesach Rishon, that you're bringing a carbon Pesach and you're eating matzah, and it excludes Pesach Sheni, where you don't have the 6 days of matzah. But it's not coming to exclude Shmini Atzeres. That's a different story. Shmini Atzeres, there is the halacha of lina. I'll bring you a raya that according to Rabbi Yehuda, it does not exclude Shmini Atzeres. That's not, because we learned in the Mishnah regarding Bikurim. Ha-bikurim tu'unin, when you bring bikurim, it requires the following things. Carbon, you have to bring a carbon shlomim with it. Rashi brings, the Yerushalmi says, you learn out from V'samachta b'chol ha'toiv. It's not, this is mamish today, the parsha of Kisaveh, today the Chumash, it says, V'samachta b'chol ha'toiv, and the simcha refers to our carbon shlomim. So that's one inyan of shlomim, of that what the bikurim requires, that is. And then the shiur, there's also a shiur that you have to sing in the Beis HaMikdash when you bring the bikurim, and Rashi here brings also, because it says samachta b'chol ha'toiv. What does toiv mean? Toiv means to sing, and the Levim used to sing Aremimcha Hashem Kedilisani, the capital of Tilim, Mizmor Shechanukas Abayis. That's what they would sing. And then what else does it require? Tenufa. You have to do tenufa to lift it up into all directions, and velina. And also, lina, you have to sleep over in Yerushalayim the day that you bring the bikurim. That's what it says there in this brayso. There is lina by the bikurim. So now, who's saying this? Who's saying that bikurim requires lina? Man shamet lei. So first of all, who's the Tana of this brayso? Man shamet lei the oma tnufa. Who's the one that says that bikurim requires tnufa? Rabbi Yehuda. It's Rabbi Yehuda that requires this. Vika Omar ton lina. And Rabbi Yehuda says that it also needs lina. So what do I see over here? That according to Rabbi Yehuda, this concept of lina is not only like a time of Pesach where you have the 6 days they eat matzah afterwards. Even by Bikurim you need lina. And therefore Rabbi Yehuda also says that by Shemini Atzeres you need lina. We only exclude Pesach Sheni. And the Gemara brings the source where Rabbi Yehuda says that the Bikurim needs tenufa. Tanya, we learned in Abraisa Rabbi Yehudaim, ve'enachtoi, this is all in the Chumash today. So ve'enachtoi is zu tenufa. This ve'enachta refers to the mitzvah of tenufa. So the Gemara now explains, ve'enachta means to place it down. How do you know that placing it down means tenufa? Atoim is zu tenufa. This means the union of tenufa. Yen ela anocha mamish. Maybe it just literally means that you should put it down there in the Beis HaMikdash. There's no tenufa here. So the Gemara says, in the pasuk before, it already says that you place it down. It already said that you place it down. So why does it tell you to say a second time because what it means is, after you placed it down once, you pick it up again to do tenufa, and then you're putting it down a second time. That's how you see that there's a mitzvah of tenufa. That's how Rashi explains it over here. Rashi in Masechta Makis says that the word v'hinachta itself means tenufa, because v'hinachta could also mean from the lashon v'lo nacham alakim derech eretz plishtim nacham, to lead it, to take it. In other words, to take it in all the directions when you do tenufa. So therefore we see that this brayso here is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda here is saying that bikurim needs lina as well. But the Gemara says this is not necessarily the case. Lav dafka, this brayso is Rabbi Yehuda. V'dilmer Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. Maybe this brayso is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. He also says that bikurim needs tenufa. The Tanya, we learned another brayso. V'lokach hakoyin atena miyadecha. Limed, this pasuk teaches me ala bikurim shetuunin tenufa. that Bikurim has to have tenufa, divrei Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. So Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov also holds that it needs tenufa. So that Braisa before, or that Mishnah before, could be Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. The Gemara now explains, where does Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov see in the pasuk tenufa? It just says, "V'lakach hakayin atena miyadecha." The kain takes it from your hand. How do you know tenufa? So the Gemara says, "My time of Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, asya yad mishlomim." He learns out the word yadecha that it says here from the yad that it says by shlomim. Ksiv acha v'lakach hakayin atena miyadecha. Or ksiv hasam by the shlomim it says yodoi tiviena es ishe Hashem makan kayin. Just like over here, there is the kayin that the kayin is taking it. Aflahalan kayin. So to over there, it has to be with the kayin. And ma'alon bailim. Just like over there, the bailim have to hold it as well. Afkan bailim. Over here, the bailim also have to hold it. In other words, the kayin and the bailim have to hold it together when they do the tenufa. Keitzat. How's the tenufa done? Kayin meniach yadai tachas yad bailim. The kayin places his hands under the hands of the bailim. Umenif. And that's how they did the tenufa, which it says there by the carbon shlomim. So we compare that the Shlomim and the Bikurim have the same halacha of Tenufa, where the Bailim and the Kayin do the Tenufa together. So Bekitzer, the Gemara is saying that there's no raya that Mishnah before is Rabbi Yehuda, it could be Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. But now, finally, the Gemara comes back to the original discussion here. Mai havi Allah. What's going to be the halacha regarding the original thing that we spoke about, Rabbi Yochanan's din, that you have to make a shechayanu on Shmini Atzeres? Do you have to or not? So the Gemara brings a machlokes. Rav Nachman said, "Oimrim zman b'shmini shachag." You say the bracha of shachayanu and shmini atzeres. Rav Sheshes says, "Ein oimrim zman b'shmini shachag." You don't make the bracha shachayanu and shmini atzeres. The hilchase, the halacha is oimrim zman b'shmini shachag. You do make a bracha shachayanu and shmini atzeres. Tanya kavasei, the Rav Nachman. We also learned like this in a Braisa, like Rav Nachman. So the Braisa says, Shmini regal bifnei atzmai. Shmini is considered to be a yontif for itself. Le'inyin pezar keshav. These 6 things that are on these 6 letters. And the Gemara, the Braisa spells it out. What are these 6 things? Payis bifnei atzmai. There's the lottery that you make for the Aveda of the Kainim on Shmini Atzeres. So Rashi says in the rest of the yontif of Sukkis, they didn't make any payis at all. You had the mishmaris that came in the Beis HaMikdash, and they would give out the different mishmaris, would do the Aveda on Sukkot. There was usually every week there was a different mishmar, but not on Yontif. On Yontif, all the mishmaris came, and each one would take a part in the Aveda without any payas. But then it came to Shmini Atzeres, it would go back to the Seder, and they would make a payas on the Shmini Atzeres. That's Rashi's pshat and payas b'fnei atzmai. Then the Zayin is zman b'fnei atzmai, that you make a shachayana for itself. So this is clearly like what Rav Nachman said. The Reish is regal b'fnei atzmai. It's a yontif for itself. So here there are 2 pshatim in this. Rashi says regal b'fnei atzmai means that she'en yoshvim b'sukkah, that you don't sit in the sukkah. Rashi in a different place, Rashi in Rosh Hashanah and Rashi in different places says that regal b'fnei atzmai is, over here it's brought over here in the bottom of the Gemara, sheyesh lo shem regal b'fnei atzmai ve'enoi karoi sukkahs, the name that it doesn't have the name of Sukkah as the name Shmini Atzeres, and that really refers regarding the bracha that you say. When you say Yom Shmini Atzeres Hazeh or Chag HaSukkah Hazeh, that's what Regel B'fnei Atzmai means. There's a sikha actually from the Rebbe regarding this Rashi, Regel B'fnei Atzmai, She'en Yoshvim B'Sukkah. It's a little bit of a strange pshat, because what do you mean that it's a Regel B'fnei Atzmai that you don't sit in the Sukkah? You don't sit in the Sukkah on any weekday either. We're trying to explain what's unique about this Regel, that it is a Regel B'fnei Atzmai. Not just that it's a regular Yom Chol that you don't sit in the Sukkah. So the Rebbe says, Mikan Raya, that on Shmini Atzeres, the fact that you don't sit in the Sukkah is different than a regular weekday when you don't sit in the Sukkah. On a regular weekday, you don't sit in the Sukkah, but it's a day that has no shaykhis to Sukkah b'chlal. Mashenka and Shmini Atzeres, there's a Sukkah, the Befedish is a Metzias of Sukkah, and the Rebbe there brings has a certain gather and halacha of a Metzias of a Sukkah, and nevertheless, you don't sit in that Sukkah. Beruchni is the Rebbe's masber over there that the whole Indian of Shmini Atzeres is to take the gilui of makif of Sukkah and to be mamshechit bepnimius. So the Indian of Shmini Atzeres has a shaykhis to Sukkah. Elamai, you're taking that Sukkah and you're bringing it bepnimius into the house. That's what Rashi says, en yeshvim b'Sukkah. Karban b'fnei atzmai, there's the karbanis for itself, a different seder of the karbanis that you bring on Shmini Atzeres. Shira b'fnei atzmai, a different shir that you sing in the Beis HaMikdash, the shir of the Leviim, as we learned before. And then also bracha b'fnei atzmai, as also a bracha for itself. So there are two pshatim here in Rashi. The first pshat Rashi says is the nusach that you say in davening and in benching, Yom Shmini Atzeres, instead of saying Yom Chag HaSukkah Sazeh. But according to another pshat, that's what regel b'fnei atzmai means. Rashi brings in the second pshat from the Tosefta that it says that on Shmini Atzeres they would bench the king. They would come and bench the king. It brings there a pasuk that it says, "Vayom Shmini Shalach Es Ha'am Vayevarchu Es HaMelech," that on Shmini Atzeres is a special inyan to go and bench the melech, and that's a special inyan on the Shmini Atzeres which you don't have in the rest of Sukkahs. So here, this is a clear brayso like Rav Nachman that on Shmini Atzeres you make the bracha of Shachayanu. Could mention there's man. That's the one of the things of the Pazar Keshav.